100 days of the Akufo-Addo-led government, and headlining our event this morning will be Dr. Mahamudu Bawumia. He's the Vice President of the Republic of Ghana. But more so, we'll be speaking to a number of the issues, and we have some of the best analysts, the best experts, and those great commentators to help us do the discussions. We have political scientists, great socio-economic commentator, and well-schooled and well-learned in his area of endeavor, Joe Jackson in the studio, a regular on the channel. And thanks for joining me.
Good to be here. Good to be here on an Easter Monday.
You see, you're supposed to be picnicking somehow.
Well, it depends on how you look at it. You know, Easter for Christians represents a period of hope.
Yeah.
So more than anything else, even in the social, economic space, in the governance space, I said to myself this morning, we must have hope.
Yes,
otherwise we're in deep trouble.
You're one person, you don't mince words. You just say it as it is. I don't know whether sometimes you get the reactions or flaks from people when you do that.
It's interesting. I said to someone that the best testimony of that we're doing something right is all through last year we were catching a lot of flack from my NDC friends. This year, my NPP friends have increasingly started throwing mud at me. That means we are doing something right.
Well, that's what we need to do as a country to help us grow, right? Okay.
We have to speak the truth.
On Saturday, I was reading something, just about various literature that had been published on the web about the benchmarks and the measurement of performance of U.S. presidents in their first 100 days in office. And we know that's where the tradition started from. I was reading something about Richard Nixon. When he was coming into office, the confidence in him was not too high. And, of course, we know what happened to him with the Watergate scandal and all that. But at the end of the day, assessing presidents 100 days into office, etc., and whether those governments which they lead did well or not, what should be usually the benchmarks we should be assessing them on?
You know, there's a Ghanaian proverb that I like. It says, "Agro beswa efi anopa." So when we assess someone on the first 100 days, we are reading the signs. 100 days is not enough for you to say he has done, executed Y, or you're just reading the signs and looking for what are the signs that show that there's something good happening, or what are the signs that show that sit well or brace yourself, we're in for a tough time. So that's what we're doing, and this whole issue about assessing is what are the signs. It's just 100 days. It's actually 3 months, settling in, appointing people, etc. But we're reading the signs.
What signs have you been reading so far, Mr. Jackson?
Okay, it's on multiple levels. The first sign, and because today is a day of hope, I want to start on the most positive sign, is that as a leader, the Nana and his team have been able to engender a huge level of optimism in this country. That is good, because without a vision, the people perish. And people must believe and have hope that things are going to improve. And for sometimes, I'm even amazed at how excited and optimistic people are, given that nothing much has changed. But you have to give Nana credit for that. He has done enough to give people a grand vision and to feel that things are going to be better. And as economists, we know that even when just the feeling of making things better can sometimes even improve the underlying numbers. So you have to give him credit. And if there's any one single thing that this country has seen in this 100 days that is on the most positive note, it is that people feel optimistic. They feel it's a new day. They feel there's a change coming. They feel things are going to get better. Today is one of the days where we start to assess whether truly are the signs right or wrong. Right? The challenge, though, is this. The greater the optimism, the greater the backlash if you are not able to match up with the optimism that people feel, because then they will feel cheated. They will feel that you've done something wrong. But as at this moment, I tell you what, 100 days, I give Nana a full take on the issue of creating a sense of optimism, which can even change the underlying economic numbers.
We know the budget has been read. Government has been formed. What are the key decision points, policies, and pronouncement that should give us the optimism you're talking about, that you have already sensed?
I'm not sure whether I'm as optimistic as the whole public.
No, you say we're talking about your observation. Okay. We're not talking about what you feel.
No, it's not about what I feel,
what
but
you have
what
observed.
Nana has been able to do in the general population.
Yes, that you have observed.
That I've observed.
From being the reaction from people.
First point, high note. The budget. The budget was a really high note. To the point where I'm wondering, where's this from? Nana has a touch that I'm amazed, because the budget, to be honest with you, the budget was making the best of a really, really difficult set of circumstances. And there was very little room to maneuver. And considering how little room there was, the budget can be said to be okay.
Okay.
But, because really, the things that changed in the budget were not that significant. We're still going to borrow, the taxes have been removed, but not the key ones that we're looking for. And we could go on and on about the budget.
We'll come back to the budget.
But the key point was the budget. The budget was a particular high point where the budget comes out and everybody says, this is the best thing that happens.
And we know that the economic and financial statement of government is based on a certain premise. What did or has the Akufo-Addo-led government inherited that is so enormous that the government then, the government's budget gives the optimism for the people?
I would say this. Number one, economic management of this country was heading in the wrong direction. And not only could we see it and predict it as economists, we could feel it in our pockets. So generally, what was, don't forget that in Ghana, almost every election is an economic referendum. Almost. So the complete and total rejection of the NDC government just said, we're not happy and we're not feeling the right things in our pocket. So that meant that the budget, everybody was looking towards the budget because it was going to be the first sign of the fulfillment of the aspirations while they had dumped the NDC government and gone in for the MPP government. But the budget, so the budget was another, as soon as the budget was read, and there was a really nice build-up to the budget. If you're an independent observer, the president comes out, gives us some highlights and say, you guys hold on, I'm just telling you.
In the State of the Nation address.
In the State of the Nation address. And the minister, Honorable Ken Ofrata, will come in and give you the numbers and the details. And he did.
Now let's talk about the budget. We know during the period of reading the budget, there was great optimism on the street. You just have to go to some of the micro areas, sectoral areas, and the people who deal with some of those sectoral areas to know that they were happy. Now, my observation was that the budget is more on the high side of providing social protection and some welfare incentives than perhaps creating the sense of optimism of revenue generation than many. Perhaps I'm wrong.
Okay. Now this, I'm talking about myself.
Sure. Because you are the expert.
Let me tell you what I think. The budget, when you break it down into small bits and you look at, oh, I'm in the agric sector, looks okay. I'm in the education sector, looks okay. I'm a parent, I have free SHS coming up.
Looks okay.
Looks okay. But then there are certain key areas that must be met for all of this to be right, we must, for example, meet our revenue numbers. So, sitting back, I ask myself, can we achieve the dramatic increase in the revenue numbers that this budget is predicated on? That's where the trouble starts. So for me, it almost seems as if, listen, you better get your GRA, your customs, your leakage prevention issues in order, growing that net. Because if you don't, you're not going to meet those numbers. And all of a sudden, we're going to wake up and it seems like we have overpromised. Because after a budget is a budget. The only thing you are sure about the budget is this. The numbers will never be exactly as it's in the budget. They will be above, they will be below, but they will never be exactly what is in the budget. Those revenue numbers give me cause to
worry.
It's a risk you're facing. And the signs are not good. 100 days, the signs are not good. The challenge our Minister of Finance faces is that he has to deliver those revenue numbers.
And he's already gone into the local market.
As for the borrowing, it wasn't going to change much. Anybody who thought that we're going to all of a sudden dramatically stop borrowing was living in La La Land. We're still going to borrow. That won't change. What we're expecting to see is a gradual reduction or a significant reduction in how much we borrow.
Well, let's take this. We'll come back and talk about that tax net and how, for all the phrases that I've been hearing from all the governments that I have been listening to since I started practicing, how do we expand the tax net, so to speak? Now, the Dean of Graduate Studies at the Institute of Local Government Studies, Dr. Odro-Osai, says the NPP government has set the right foundation in its first 100 days in office. Let's watch him.
That's something I think for every government and typical of every country, in your first 100 days, you put the foundation in place, you put the structures in place to enable you prosecute your agenda. My assessment of the first 100 days, one, they've made interim appointments. Two, by way of structure, they've taken over national level governance by way of appointing ministers for the various MDAs. But what is lacking now is their inability to take over the subnational government level, and that is very critical. I also think that they've also been honest with Ghanaians by way of having some of their promises, their manifesto promises, reflected in the budgets, though they are yet to prepare their first development plan. Though we have a development plan running, but within the meaning of Article 35, they are also supposed to come up with something. So all in all, I think they've gotten the governance indicators right. I think they are also expected as an institution or as a government to validate and verify the foundations of the economy and the governance architecture they inherited through the various handing over notes. And in the process of validating them, they've gotten it wrong because of the activities of these invisible forces and the likes. But I think that if they are able to work their way around well, in the next 6 months or so, they will do well.
And Dr. Odro-Osai, who is the Dean of Graduate Studies at the Institute of Local Government Studies, was speaking on Newsfile over the weekend. And for many of the things that he said, well, the NPP has started well and all that. And I know that you also enumerated that based on the observation you get from the ordinary Ghanaian. Now, if we have to increase the tax net, how do we do that? Knowing that we can identify people. There are people in the informal sector who are in lots of possession of cash, undertake a lot of trade and commerce, just don't account to anybody. They are not bankable, they are not traceable.
There are a number of things that I think. Number one is a national ID system, which in truth the NPP has talked about, right? Getting a real...
We have a committee actually in place.
Yes. So it's one of the things that they're working on. But think about it. Why is it not when you go and register a vehicle, you don't show what tax you paid. It's an asset. Why is it that if you go and register a house and that is already on the laws of the land, you don't show how much tax you've paid? Why is it that when you go and register a company, you put a TIN number, but nobody is asking you for how much tax you paid? And think about it. Even at that section alone, if we said, anytime you do anything to register an asset, show us how much tax you paid with regards to that asset, that would immediately create a completely different environment for paying taxes. Because if you don't pay taxes, then you're going to show how you earn that income to register that car, to do this, to do that. It's simultaneously gives corruption a lot of problems, because now it might not be easy to convert your ill-gotten wealth into assets. Two, it will bring us taxes. So it's not as if, and this is not rocket science. It's just that we're waiting to make sure that it's done. And because we've seen over and over again failure of governments to deliver on this tax expansion bracket. And what they do is a tax deepening bracket, which means they tax the few of us who get caught in the net more and more, rather than getting a bigger net and sweeping it wider. That's why we complain. We complain because if you're in the formal sector, you get taxed to death. If you're in the informal sector, you escape completely. So you've got to find ways and means and critical points, and registration of an asset is one of them, to make sure that we trap people and make sure that they pay taxes. Another thing is cross-referencing. We should have a tax database that if you say, I brought in goods of this much, does it translate into the what you're declaring to the tax man, etc., etc. So we can start cross-referencing and make it harder for you to slip through and lie about how much tax you owe.
So I bet we know that having a structure of an identifiable system for the citizenry is key. But is it the only panacea?
It's not the only panacea. There are other issues. You see, unfortunately, even the structures that are supposed to collect the taxes themselves are at the moment don't want to collect the taxes, because it's easier for them to create chaos and put the tax money in their pocket.
Why is that?
It's very simple. I would rather you pay the bribe than you pay tax.
Well, it goes to the benefits of the individuals.
Exactly.
So you're saying we need to be conscientized to be more
even
patriotic?
those structures that are there, the Internal Revenue Service or and so on and so forth, even the staff there are more inclined to get you to avoid and dodge taxes, because that creates an avenue for bribery, than for you to pay what is the right amount of tax. So you're talking about institutions for which the individual goes to work and the first thing he thinks about is, how do I get some of this government money siphoned into my own pocket, rather than how do I get this money out there.
Mr. Joe Jackson, the scenario you create is frightening then, because we may have a national identification system and still not be able to reach out to those in the informal sector or those who are unbanked and untapped.
There are several ways to get around it. A national identification system, taxes that are low enough to encourage people in the informal sector to pay, making sure we look at the registration of assets, and that you're going to register assets, you're looking at it, making sure we cross-reference all the other details so that it makes it harder for you to avoid or dodge taxes. The point is, it's a huge, concerted, holistic effort that will get us to meet those revenue targets, that aggressive revenue targets that have been met. It's not as simple as throw out a few nuisance taxes and then all of a sudden everybody is happy paying tax. So back to what I talked about. In that budget, one of the biggest risk factors is the size of the huge increase in taxes to be collected and how that money is going to feed into all the different promises they made to different interest groups.
I see. At the end of the day, we know that companies are supposed to get some incentives because they are structured in the formal sector, and you're supposed to get something back. Those tax backs that companies get, those incentives, how do we make sure that everybody captured gets those incentives? Let's say if you employ people, they're saying if you employ young people, you get some incentives, etc. How do we do it in a more structured way?
You see, here's the challenge you have. When you don't have a proper system for evaluating whether each person is paying the right amount of tax.
You mean reference system?
Reference system. And where the tax that they are paying, I'll be honest with you, a lot of companies, the tax they are paying is a negotiated amount between the IRS and themselves. There's no real incentive to go in and get the tax reliefs that are required. I'll give you a very good example. Leasing. On paper, leasing is a fantastic thing. An organization like Multimedia or Joy News should be leasing cameras and equipment, etc. But guess what happens to most of the companies? Because taxes are negotiated between IRS, and really that's the proper practice that's the practice that happens now, right? You don't make money from leasing because people are not interested in the tax rebates that come from leasing. So the leasing companies in Ghana are going smaller and smaller and smaller.
That's interesting.
And the only people who lease are the big multinationals who are compliant, because there's a big brother out there who says that every country that I operate in, I want to be compliant. Big deal. Local companies don't get the benefit of leasing. Leasing for SMEs and medium-sized companies, whatever, is dead.
Well, so it's still the prelude to our town hall meeting where we're going to have the Vice President of the Republic of Ghana, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, address a gathering of both experts, the public, and there'll be great speeches, but also question and answer periods. And for all the concerns you have, I'm sure if they're put in questions, could be answered by notably the Vice President and his entourage or the experts who are there, just to mark 100 days in office of the Akufo-Addo-led government. It is a Joy News initiative, and we have Gifty and Apia live on the ground where the town hall meeting will be taking place. And good morning to you, Gifty. You're already there. And what's the atmosphere like?
Well, good morning. All about for us here at Joy News. Of course, this is a first by Joy News, and it's been brought to us by a few sponsors. And just a quick touch on who they are: ADB Bank, Agric and More, Papa's Pizza, Taste It, Love It, Adishia Estate, Asasi Pafie Ahotonkwa, Holy Insecticide Spray in Tuntum Straw, Basa, and of course we'll bring you some others as we go along. But yes, we're here, we're ready to start. I mean, the security people, everybody's doing their bit. The ushers are here. Very beautiful ladies from Joy News. Everybody is ready here. And of course, I have our editor in charge of Special Project, Jahunyan, who'll be joining me in just a bit so we can have a quick conversation. Already we have some people seated and we're waiting for others. Let me just tell you, we have invited a long list of people. We're expecting the AGI, the TUC, the PWDs, Imani Ghana, CDD, the Council of State, the Ghana Anti-Corruption Coalition, National Union of Ghana Students, and the list goes on and on. But Jahu is here. She has more. Today is the day that we're looking. You want your question?
And give to Andwapia giving us an overview there. We'll try and establish the pictures there for you to see here live. and we'll tell you what the atmosphere is. It's at the new law complex here in Accra, and we'll bring you those live feeds from there. But if we have to then go beyond those one, make sure that the companies get their reliefs, how would that be helpful for the expansion drive of those companies and ultimately create a cyclical circle in which they contribute significantly to revenue?
You see, your challenge is not really those companies that are already paying some amount of tax.
What's then?
Growing the net.
Okay.
So,
for example, like the informal
sector.
Informal SME that is somewhere located in the community I grew up in, Ashama, for example.
Exactly.
That doesn't pay taxes, but let's say manufactures soap. Could be soap. Some aluminium utensils.
Yes.
And sells it in a Ashama market, yes, or Ada or someplace.
Yes.
Free and doesn't pay anybody anything.
Yes, or does a little bit of puts together noni juice, yes, in bottles and sells.
Free.
How do you get those people to pay taxes?
How do we conscientize them to pay taxes then, if we have the right structures in place?
You see, first of all, right, tax is interesting. Mm-hmm. People pay tax. Nobody likes paying tax. I want to pay as little tax as possible, right? But it is easier to pay tax if you feel that your money is being used in the right way. It is harder and harder to pay tax if you think that the tax I pay is being misused in corrupt, being chopped, etc. One of the first ways to get, and it's not so much telling someone to pay tax is not the key. It's getting someone convinced that at the center, I'm trying my best to use your tax for the right thing. Then when you ask me for tax, then it's easier to pay, right? Both at the local government level and at the national level. Unless as a society we start to believe that people are less corrupt, or even if they are corrupt, they will be punished, people will always find it hard to pay tax.
Mm. I see. Now, how have we structured anti-corruption policies and implementation agencies in such a way that while we want to increase the tax net, expand the tax net, generate the revenue, we also have well-structured way of expenditure in such a way that there's accountability?
Okay, now here, let's go back to our original theme. 100 days, mm-hmm, and ask ourselves, in this 100 days, are there significant indications that this government will go after corruption in a structured, consistent, efficient, but also aggressive way, at least more aggressive than the previous regime? The jury on that is still out, because there's huge promise of a special prosecutor.
3 months hasn't come into fruition.
We don't even know how it's happening. All we know is that there are several people have come out to say the special prosecutor has to be under the Attorney General. Some people say not. I'm not a lawyer, so I hesitate to wade into that discussion. But whatever it is, it's 3 months. And all we know is that 3 months after taking power, one of the biggest stakes that was wielded against the opposition, which is the stake of corruption, and it hasn't happened. And for me, that's one of the question marks we have for this 100 days. The budget has come. They've made the best out of a bad situation. The president has given us optimism and a vision for the future, right? The budget may promise a bit, or promise more than some of us would have wished, but hey, let's assume that there's going to be some fantastic implementation. But what about corruption? What about all the tales we heard of people who looted? Are the tales untrue? If they are true, are we going after the people who have taken our money? Some of them, we've gone to court and we've established that they've stolen our money. Has any move been made to get those people to pay? Or have they missed deadlines? There is one of, and as a citizen of this country, and as a person who understands, unless we go after corruption, it will come back and haunt us in multiple ways. Because people of this regime, and Ghanaians are no different, might feel that they will get away with it. Where still, it will make it harder and harder to collect taxes. The only way we're going to do this is that people who have taken our money in times past, we are going after them. 100 days. Not a significant sign yet.
But a significant sign is that the promise of having free SHS for senior high schools is going to come to fruition, at least by the start of the academic year. The criticism is that it's not going to affect already those in school. So then, is it a wishy-washy kind of situation? Is it a fluid kind of situation?
No,
is it a very
not.
good expenditure?
Let me tell you this. Let's not be confused. Free SHS is a good thing. Right? If you deal with people who can't go to school because they can't afford SHS, and in my own little way, in my own heart, in my widow's mite, I know of the number of people who need a help, a boost to go to school, and sometimes something as low as 100, 200, 300 cedis can make the difference between a child dropping out of school and not dropping out of school. You can't sit on your high horse and say free SHS is wrong. But there's a flip side. The flip side is simply this. As a country, if we are as broke as we said we were in December of last year, as we said we were in the State of the Nation address, where are the hard decisions that must be taken?
As in?
If you are broke, you take a hard decision.
Not to?
Yes, if you are broke, however much you might feel like eating papaya this afternoon, you may have to end up eating a bowl of kinky.
But now we're eating the papaya.
Now we seem to be promising both papaya and being broke.
Yeah.
And that for me is a source of worry.
How do we circumvent that?
We can't. At this moment, the president has promised. It's set in stone. He said he's going to implement free SHS.
Ideally, the way the pronouncement was during the campaign period and now formally announced, could we have better announced it by way of the implementation? Perhaps targeting only needy and brilliant students.
Listen.
Instead of doing an across-board thing.
When the promise was made, it didn't say needy and...
Voters will not take no for an answer.
No, the promise was made. I would have postponed the implementation so that we could have a year of consolidation, fixing things, and bank on the goodwill and the optimism that obviously this president has been able to create, so that we could say, listen, things are really bad. We promised this, but we won't do it in the 2017-2018 academic year, but we'll do it in the 2018-2019 academic year, so that we buy ourselves some time, make sure the structures are in place, make sure. My only problem is that at this moment, so much is predicated on us being able to execute everything. We don't have any room for maneuver. And I still don't see the hard decisions taken.
Is it too much a load, the high-end load on the budgets then, the expenditure side?
Oh, it is significant.
What could be the ramifications or the repercussions?
Well, here's what the
It's hypothetical.
hypothetical.
But then what will happen to us at the end has happened before
Yes.
in civilizations.
What's the risk? The risk would be that we don't meet our revenue targets.
Right. We're in trouble.
Then we're in trouble. So we will, instead of doing a few things well, we'll most probably be able to do a lot of things poorly.
Oh, we'll come back and continue the conversation. And Joe Jackson will help us do the conclusion on many of the subjects we're discussing. But and we've been talking about the economy a lot more. But we've had other socio-economic activities that may have happened within this period of 100 days of the Akufo-Addo government that people perhaps will say that agrobeso ifianopa.
Yes, there have been some highs. The highs were the State of the Nation address. Yeah. Another high was the inauguration itself was the biggest high of them all. The inauguration, the State of the Nation, the budget. But after that, there have been some lows. One low was the size, just the sheer size of government.
You think size matters? Well, 110 should be enough for us.
No, here's the thing.
Looking at the enormity of the difficulties that face Ghana as a country.
That's not the issue. But you see, if you say you are broke, if you say you are going to, sometimes you yourself must show signs that we are trying to make do on less. And just 110 appointees with all the other resources that go with it just created a sense of, is this going right? And again, it's a sign. Listen, if a year from now targets have been met, nobody will care whether there's 110 or is 100 or 210. But at this moment, we have to comment about the size.
It's a big deal.
It's not a huge deal, but it's a significant deal. What is a huge deal, though, is what has happened over the last couple of weeks with the vigilante groups, the Delta forces, the invisible forces, and all those groups that have taken the law into their hands, culminating in the...
well, the president made an emphatic statement on them, and the law courts also, and the security agents are supposed to make sure that they do their work.
The challenge was, it took just slightly a little bit more time than it should. The statement should have come, first of all, should have come earlier. The signs were there. We were heading in that direction. Nobody should act like they are surprised of what happened in Kumasi happened. We had been heading in that direction, and it seemed as if we had been handing them with kid gloves, not calling a spade, not coming at them, painting the Minister of Interior black. And then Kumasi happened. And then all of a sudden, all of us were looking at this. We shouldn't have been shocked. The signs were there. Then there was not an immediate and emphatic statement.
And you think that's a blot?
I think that's a blot.
All right. Thank you very much. A scale of 0 to 10?
I say this. Those blots still haven't eroded confidence in the president. So on a scale of 1 to 10, you have to give him excellent marks.
Okay.
As a president, his biggest task is to give us a vision, because without a vision, the people perish.
Well, thank you very much, Joe Jackson. And Joe Jackson is joining us this morning and helping us with the conversation, just like many others also this morning. And next, we'll be having Dr. Kwabena Opuni-Frimpong. He's the General Secretary, the Christian Council of Ghana. Again, it's come down to the main event, the town hall meeting with the Vice President of the Republic of Ghana, marking 100 days of the Akufo-Addo-led administration in office. And it's a Joy News initiative. If you want to get interactive, please, you can do so on Facebook. We have Joy News on TV. And we also have interactive handles also on Twitter, Joy News on TV. And please use the hashtag. Make sure you use the hashtag AskBaumia.